Vikes Now, Dustin Baker back on Wednesday night for a short episode about Lewis Cine and the snub by the world champions from 2020, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So on this one, here's what happened. On Richard Sherman's podcast, who was also recently a member of the Buccaneers, Lewis Cine was a guest, and he was given praise and compliments by Sherman, an endorsement. Cine gets all these endorsements. I'm going to digress for a minute here. From Deion Sanders, Ryan Clark, Chris Sims, and I think there was another big one. But yeah, Hall of Fame player, Chris Sims, the guy who always nails the quarterback projections in the draft. Yeah, they're all high on Cine, so that's a good omen for the Vikings. Get that little factoid out of the way. Richard Sherman on that podcast, Cine said that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers told Cine that if he was there for them with their draft pick, that they would indeed take him. They didn't tell the truth, or they changed plans. And so Cine indeed did not become a Buccaneer. Instead, the Buccaneers traded out of the pick, and he fell all the way to the Vikings with the 32nd overall pick. So you read a quote like this, it was posted to Twitter, like in a PFF graphic, that implies that it was a humongous snub. I mean, it probably was for him personally when he was waiting it out on draft night, thinking, all right, they told me this, so I'm going there. I'm going to a sturdy franchise right out of the gate. Nope. They traded out, and ultimately, the Bucs got Logan Hall, an edge rusher, that big tight end, Cade Otton. I think that was the first pick of round 3 or something like that. I can't remember exactly when it was. And Luke Gedicke, an offensive lineman. So they flipped their pick with the Jacksonville Jaguars, and kind of like the Vikings did, got more players, a quantity, hoping to partner quality with that. But this draft snub stuff, it happens. I think notably, about a month ago, Jalen Ramsey came out and said the Cowboys told him in 2016 that he was their man, and then they swerved, and they chose Ezekiel Elliott. So it's kind of a headline thing when you see a guy like Cine was passed on, promised to a Tom Brady-led team that, why the hell didn't they pick him? That's not very fair. So it was designed to get your interest, and that's why I wanted to speak on it. But yeah, he indeed, at least in his interpretation, was snubbed by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who traded the pick to the Jacksonville Jaguars. And here's the weird part, and I get best player available is usually the philosophy of a sweet franchise with Brady there in the Buccaneers. But where would Cine have fit if indeed he was told by the Bucs, like, you're coming to Florida, homie? Like, they have Antoine Winfield, who you wanted the Vikings to pick during the pandemic draft. And then they have Logan Ryan, who they onboarded, and he's a journeyman good veteran safety. And those two dudes are starters. So had Cine gone to the Bucs, I don't know that he would have got the playing time that he's scheduled to receive with these 2022 Minnesota Vikings. So it might be a blessing in disguise, and we know verifiably Brady's not going to play there much longer, unless you're one of the cynics that says, like, oh yeah, he's playing until he's 50. He won't. He's going to get $37.5 million per year calling football games on Sundays. So Cine will get a more immediate chance to play with the Vikings than on the Bucs. So hopefully he rejoices in that. I think he's already embraced it. You have Harrison Smith to the other side of him. And on that Brady thing, I tweeted this out, but I want to lift this up as a matter of context or just wrapping your head around the whole thing with Brady. So he started being a part of your life in 2001, and that was 21 years ago. So by the time he hangs up cleats, puts on dress shoes for the television booth, that will end up being 21 or 22 years. And then he signed the 10-year deal with Fox, and he won't be incredibly old in the grand scheme of life, old for a football player, but he could conceivably be a part of Sundays, like right in your face, for 30 to 50 years. That is the thumbprint he's going to put on this game, as if he even needed an extra set of prints to put on there with that GOAT resume that he has. So, I digressed there. That was a segue. But yeah, think about that. Brady will be on your television for 30 to 50 years. And not like an ambassador of the game or something in the background, like Magic Johnson cheering players on, like actually calling games like Romo does beyond his career. And boom, 3 to 5 decades of Thomas Brady. That's interesting. So on the Vikings aspect of Cine, he'll get more playing time unless he beat out Logan Ryan, which I guess is possible in Tampa Bay. But the only person he has to beat out on the 2022 Vikings roster is Cameron Bynum. And this will be one of the more interesting dynamics for me and for you, the men and women that get into the guts of this team that don't watch it from a casual surface. You watch it in the weeds and examine jersey numbers and schedule releases and draft classes. It'll be interesting to see where Bynum ends up because, I kid you not, that man did everything he was asked to in 2021, filled in for Harrison Smith at the Ravens, looked marvelous. And because the Vikings made no safety acquisitions this offseason via free agency, Bynum was on track to start. And that's what the tea leaves were saying. But then bada bing, they drafted Lewis Cine, who is a type of hitter that should be starting opposite Harrison Smith right away. So you got to kind of feel bad for Bynum. He did it precisely what was asked of him. And when the lights came on, he was ready. He was there. He looked just as good as Harrison Smith for a couple weeks. You know, it's a long example to toe for many years, but a fourth rounder, when they called his name, the dude showed up. So now we'll have to figure out how many snaps he gets in an Ed Donatel defense because, my gosh, he deserves it. He did what he was supposed to last year, and I really thought he was going to start because I didn't really see them drafting a safety if they didn't get Kyle Hamilton. And that's another thing to watch throughout the course of these two guys' career, especially from a Vikings fan perspective, is you got to wonder and compare Kyle Hamilton to Lewis Cine. And it'll get on your nerves after a while, but Vikings had every chance to pick him up. The tumble was real. You remember in the lead up to the draft, those final 2 weeks, so when some mocks showed Hamilton tumbling to the Vikings, and I was like, you're trying to speak that one into existence, baby, because he's a top 3 football player in the draft. And I'll be damned, it happened, and the Vikings passed on him. If I was general manager, I'm not, I'm just a writer, I would have went with Hamilton and told the Lions to screw off, because Hamilton is really a surefire talent from Notre Dame, and it would have been good vibes to have back-to-back safeties from Notre Dame with first-round draft stock and just have 20 years worth of safeties from Notre Dame that know what they're doing. But I still like Cine. I like all of the capital and players subsequently that Kwesi got with trading back, so I don't have a big beef with it, but I would have taken Hamilton, and henceforth, Hamilton will be compared to Cine because they play the same position, and they were the first 2 safeties off the board. Little lesson for you. On the Tampa snub, it doesn't sound, based on the quote, that Cine was overly thrilled by the news that, hey, we're going to take you, and then they didn't. So it could be one of those things where he remembers them, and then maybe that will bode well for the purple and yellow team at some point, like that Moss energy that, yeah, you idiots passed on me, so I'm going to torch your ass every time we play. I don't know if it was quite that egregious, but if they looked him in the eye or they sent him an email or whatever it was that say, we're going to draft you, and then they didn't, he's going to remember it. And it's good to have a mad football player in Cine who's already mean and violent by nature. It's a good mix for your defense. He doesn't need an extra chip on his shoulder because he already has it, and that's the knock on the guy, is that he's too violent, and he was better suited for the NFL of 1999. We'll see if he can rein that in, but you're getting a mean football player who has extra motivation to be mad, based on this little driblet from the Richard Sherman podcast. And the other news today on Cine, which I could have co-titled this right down here, is that he's in the house for good for 4 years. The Vikings are fully guaranteed to have him, and they put money in his piggy bank to the tune of 11.4 something million, fully guaranteed. That's kind of the trend as of late, is the top 25 dudes or so get those guaranteed money contracts. And for Cine, it was a token of good faith because he was the 32nd pick, and NFLPA has been pushing for guaranteed dollars. So Cine will be a part of your psyche for at least 4 years, hopefully. For God's sake, one of these first rounders works out for an additional contract like Jefferson's trending to. But our track record here as of late with the defensive players in the secondary staying beyond the rookie deal, yikes, hasn't really worked since Xavier Rhodes. On this topic of the secondary, I don't know if you saw it, but on ESPN, Luke Kuechly, the dude that up and retired from the Panthers defense a few years ago, he was on a show and he called the Vikings secondary the best in the NFL. And I wanted to call that out because I don't agree with that. But if Luke Kuechly says it, he's not grandstanding, hoping that you'll take attention to something clickbaity. The guy knows football, and he's like a real earnest thinker about these things. So for him to give an endorsement to the Vikings is like, I always ask this, what does he know that we don't? So it's cool that it's him, and it's not just some schmo on CBS Sports that says, hey, I think they're the best secondary that there is. No, this is a guy who played the game at an extremely high level for a decade almost. And if he says the Vikings secondary is good, maybe we should start to buy into it. Finally, there's some schedule driblets at this time tomorrow. We will know the full schedule. Right now, we know that there's going to be a week 1 home game, unless the NFL is going to sock the Vikings with 3 road games out of 4 out of the gate. Be weird. So week 1 home game, probably against the Giants or Cardinals, are the whispers that I've heard over the last week and a half. Week 2 at Philadelphia. I had a whole show on that earlier this week. A mini vengeance game. You don't like the Eagles. They don't like you. Let's beat their ass in Philly on Monday night. Week 4 in London. That's happening. An away game on a neutral site for the undefeated Vikings in London. They're 2-0 there. So are the Saints. They're also 2-0. And the other thing that we know, there's nothing else that we know beyond the shadow of a doubt, but there was a leak tonight from a quasi-credible account on Twitter that said week 15, the Vikings at the Bills, which would be the week before Christmas. I believe it's the 18th. Be cold. The Bills will be good unless something happens to Josh Allen. So that game's going to be nasty. Unless Kevin O'Connell brings some road voodoo to Minnesota, which would be pretty sweet. Although under Zimmer, the Vikings were pretty decent on the road. Whether or not your cynicism agrees statistically, they were. And then it appears the Vikings and Packers will lock horns on New Year's Day at Lambeau. That's one of the ones that I heard tonight from a credible source. We'll see if he does me wrong. I think he's solid. And then it looks like are you on the edge of your seat? It looks like the final home game of the year will be Vikings and Bears for the 7th consecutive season. Because I don't know what it is, but they love to plop that game on there. And it seems like we're going to do it all over again. Tomorrow, I have Dustin Klug, a second Dustin, on the show. He is on Vikings Twitter, that Vikings fan. And he's one of the ones that taught me some of this video stuff at the bottom with the headlines and showed me how to plop the logo on here. And I like his football brain. So we're going to talk about the Vikings. And then Friday, Vikings Central is a Twitter account as well. You see where my contacts are. The gentleman who mans that account is going to join me for an interview about the Purple Team. And I'll ask these guys some of their projections for the summer and for the subsequent 2022 regular season. Hope you enjoyed the chat on Lewis Cine being snubbed by Tom Brady's team. I will be back tomorrow with the other Dustin, and we will talk about the Vikes. Skol, baby.